For centuries, Rome didn't dominate the ancient world just because of its legions or massive siege engines. Sometimes the weapons that shaped history were the ones nobody expected. Hidden inside Roman shields, carried quietly into battle, and unleashed at the exact moment it mattered most, there was a tool so simple that entire barbarian armies never saw it coming. It didn't roar like artillery or crash like cavalry, yet it broke charges, shattered morale, and turned chaotic battles into controlled Roman victories. This is the weapon that looked harmless until it hit, the weapon that exploited discipline over brute force, and the weapon many tribes feared even when they never fully understood how it worked. Number 1. The weapon that looked too simple to fear. The Roman military was known for discipline, precision, and cold efficiency. Yet one of its most destructive tools didn't look like a masterpiece of warfare at all. It wasn't a massive siege engine, a heavy blade, or a complicated mechanical device. Instead, it was a small throwing dart called the plumbata. At first glance, it seemed unimpressive. A wooden shaft, an iron point, and a teardrop-shaped lead weight attached near the middle. But this simple shape hid a devastating purpose. Roman soldiers carried several of these darts tucked behind their shields or strapped against their backs, kept out of sight until the exact moment they were needed. Most barbarian warriors expected a loud, face-to-face clash. They mentally prepared for shield bashes, sword swings, and chaotic hand-to-hand fights. What they didn't expect was a sudden rain of silent darts dropping from above before they even made contact. The plumbata didn't rely on brute strength. It relied on accuracy and perfect timing skills Roman legionaries trained obsessively. The dart flew farther than a thrown spear and hit harder than anyone expected from something so small. Barbarians who charged head-on towards the Roman line quickly learned how dangerous it was. The iron tip pierced through leather armor, slipped between shield boards, tore into muscle, and instantly killed momentum. A single dart could cripple a leg or bury itself deep in a shield, forcing a warrior to slow down or fall out of formation. But dozens of darts thrown at once created a terrifying wave of confusion. People described hearing a strange whistling in the air, seconds before the darts slammed into the charging line. This split-second disruption was often enough to destroy the unity of a barbarian attack. A charge that began with confidence suddenly turned into hesitation, shouting, and chaos. And once that moment of disorder appeared, the disciplined Roman line used it to take full control of the battlefield. Number 2. Why the plumbata hit harder than expected. What made the plumbata so destructive wasn't just the sharpened iron point, but the carefully balanced lead weight attached to it. This weight completely changed the way the dart behaved in the air. Barbarian warriors, who were used to straightforward weapons, axes, spears, clubs, didn't understand the physics behind it. But Roman engineers certainly did. As soon as a soldier released the dart, the lead weight pulled its nose downward, creating a steep, powerful dive. Unlike arrows or javelins that travel mostly in a straight line, the plumbata came down like a falling spear. This top-down angle was a nightmare for barbarians because their shields were designed to block horizontal attacks. A shield protects best when held forward, not overhead. So when dozens of plumbatae began dropping from above, shields suddenly became less effective. Some darts punched directly through the shield surface. Others stuck so deeply that the shield instantly became heavier and harder to maneuver. A shield with 3 or 4 plumbatae stuck in it became almost useless, pulling the warrior's arm down and making it harder to fight. Some fighters tore the darts out while running. Others ripped the shield off completely just to move freely again. This left them exposed at the worst possible moment. Momentum was everything for barbarian fighters. Their greatest strength charging with speed and raw aggression disappeared as soon as they were slowed even a little. The plumbata wasn't made to kill large numbers instantly. It was made to break rhythm. A slowed charge collapsed faster, creating gaps in the barbarian line. And the Romans understood that battlefield momentum was a weapon in itself. Even more impressive was how efficiently Roman formations used the plumbata. Soldiers in the second and third rows could throw darts over the front line without breaking formation. This meant the Romans could unleash multiple waves of darts while staying protected behind shields. It was an early form of layered missile fire, the kind of coordinated tactic centuries ahead of its time. Instead of relying on individual strength, the Romans relied on discipline, technique, and a weapon that multiplied their force without tiring their soldiers. That combination made the plumbata far more effective than its small size suggested. Number 3. How Roman training turned. A simple dart into a battlefield nightmare. The plumbata became so feared not because of its design alone, but because of how the Romans trained with it. Soldiers didn't simply toss these darts at random moments. Training was repetitive, strict, and designed to make every movement second nature. Legionaries practiced throwing plumbatae at various ranges and angles. They learned low arc throws that skimmed forward toward enemies already close, high arc throws that fell sharply onto advancing warriors, and direct shots meant to disrupt cavalry charges. The key was smooth release. Soldiers were taught not to muscle the dart, but to let the weight do the work. This allowed even exhausted fighters to throw accurately deep into a battle. Timing was everything. The most effective moment to unleash plumbatae was right before the enemy hit the Roman shield wall. That tiny window, just a few seconds, created maximum disruption. Barbarian warriors, sprinting with full force, suddenly found themselves struck by darts they never saw prepared. A dart hitting the thigh slowed the runner. A dart piercing the shoulder made swinging a weapon painful. A dart striking a foot or lower leg could collapse a fighter instantly. And because injuries from above were unexpected, they threw the entire charge off balance. Roman commanders coordinated these throws so that entire ranks hurled their darts at once. The effect was a sudden, synchronized storm of falling iron. Some ancient descriptions mention barbarian warriors stumbling, slipping on wounded companions, or falling as plumbatae stuck in their legs or shields. A tightly packed charging formation relies entirely on confidence and steady forward motion. Once that motion broke, even momentarily, the Roman front line stepped forward calmly, shields locked, ready to finish an opponent already destabilized. The dart wasn't meant to end battles on its own. It was meant to shape the battle exactly the way Rome preferred. Slow the enemy, break their unity, make them hesitate, and then face the Roman shield wall on Roman terms. That combination turned a simple dart into one of the most psychologically effective weapons of the late Empire. Even when barbarian groups learned about the plumbata, they still couldn't fully adapt, because nothing in their traditional fighting style countered a weapon that punished momentum and exposed every weakness in a disorganized charge. The Romans didn't just throw darts. They used them to control distance, timing, and emotional pressure, winning the fight long before swords ever touched. Number 4. Why barbarian armies had no real counter to it. Barbarian tribes had long studied Roman warfare. They understood the wall of shields, the disciplined advance, and the deadly efficiency of the gladius. What they did not understand was how to handle a weapon that didn't behave like anything they had trained against before. The plumbata broke every expectation they had about missiles. A javelin could be spotted the moment a Roman soldier raised his arm. A slingstone produced a sharp whirling sound before it was released. Both gave at least some warning, enough time for a warrior to brace himself or adjust his shield. But the plumbata didn't follow that pattern. It was almost silent, light enough to hide behind a shield, and launched with a motion so subtle that enemies often didn't notice it until the dart was already falling toward them. The Romans took advantage of that silence. Their shields concealed the darts until the last possible second, and their formation allowed multiple ranks to throw without exposing themselves. Barbarians facing the legions saw no big gestures, no dramatic preparation, just a sudden rain of darts punching through shields, armor, and exposed limbs. Round barbarian shields, often made of layered wood with a leather covering, were never designed for angled impacts from above. They were built to block sword strikes and horizontal blows, not weighted darts diving down with force. Reinforced shields occasionally helped, but even then, the angle made defense inconsistent. A dart landing near the shield rim could tilt it downward, opening gaps for follow-up attacks. And once a shield was stuck with several plumbatae, it became heavier and awkward to hold. Warriors who depended on mobility suddenly found themselves slowed down or forced to discard their shield entirely, which was practically a death sentence in front of the Roman line. Even mounted units had no real solution. Horses panicked at sudden hits, stumbling or throwing riders off balance. A cavalry charge that lost its timing was worse than no charge at all. It became a scattered group rushing into a perfectly organized Roman wall. Barbarian commanders had no reliable way to respond. They couldn't order their men to shoot back because the Roman throwers stayed fully protected. Closing the distance faster didn't help because the darts were designed to be used right before contact. Retreating didn't help either because hesitation created gaps the Romans exploited immediately. The plumbata broke their flow, disrupted their rhythm, and made traditional barbarian tactics feel outdated. For a people who fought with raw momentum, losing that momentum meant losing the battle before touching a Roman shield. Number 5. The psychological damage that made barbarians fear the unknown. Fear on the battlefield doesn't always come from seeing a massive weapon. Sometimes the deepest fear appears when the enemy uses something small, unpredictable, and impossible to prepare for. The plumbata created exactly that kind of dread. Warriors charging toward the Romans expected to trade blows face to face. They shouted war cries, beat their shields, and prepared for a clash of strength. But halfway through the charge, a sharp, sudden pain stopped them cold. A dart they didn't see coming buried itself in a shoulder, a thigh, or even the face. The Romans still stood motionless, shields locked, showing no signs of having thrown anything. That disconnect being hit, while the enemy appeared completely still made the plumbata feel unnatural. To many barbarian fighters, this wasn't just a weapon. It felt like an invisible attack that broke the rules of combat. News spread fast between tribes. Survivors whispered about the darts falling from the sky, claiming the Romans had weapons blessed by strange powers. In cultures where omens guided decisions, unexplained pain from an unseen source became a terrifying symbol. Younger warriors were warned to avoid Roman shield walls altogether, believing these mysterious darts could appear at any moment. This fear wasn't baseless. Romans intentionally hid the plumbatae inside their shields, revealing them only when the timing was perfect. The effect was psychological warfare, layered onto physical injury. Imagine sprinting with full confidence, only to be stopped by something you never saw moving. War demands certainty, and the plumbata stole that certainty from barbarian troops. Once a line lost confidence in its charge, everything else collapsed. A soldier who hesitates for even a heartbeat disrupts the warriors behind him. Movement slows, formations loosen, and the roar of an advancing army turns into scattered voices. Roman commanders understood this perfectly. They trained their men not just to kill, but to destabilize. A shaken enemy was easier to predict, easier to control, and easier to defeat with minimal losses. The plumbata cut deeper than flesh. It cut into morale. Barbarian fighters began misjudging distances, assuming darts would hit earlier or later than they actually did. Some overprotected themselves, raising shields too high and exposing their bodies to Roman spears. Others tried rushing faster and arrived exhausted, disorganized, and vulnerable. Rome didn't need the plumbata to be deadly every time. It only needed it to be terrifying enough that the enemy's courage cracked before the real fight began. That crack turned disciplined Roman formations into psychological walls that barbarians hesitated to touch. Over time, the dart became a quiet legend. Not the kind sung by poets, but the kind soldiers remembered when deciding whether to fight Rome at all. Number 6. How the plumbata strengthened Rome's battle formula. Roman success wasn't based on having the biggest sword or the strongest warrior. It came from a formula and organized, layered approach where every tool, every formation, and every movement supported the next. The plumbata fit into that formula with almost mathematical precision. It was never meant to win the battle on its own. Instead, it shaped the fight so that the rest of the Roman system could operate at full efficiency. A barbarian line slowed by dart injuries created the perfect scenario for pilum volleys. The pilum, already known for bending on impact and disabling shields, became even more effective when thrown at opponents who were trying to adjust their footing or shake off plumbatae stuck in their arms and legs. By the time the enemy pushed through this layer of damage, they reached the Roman shield wall in a weakened state. Their shields were heavier, their formations uneven, and their breath shorter. Roman infantry thrived under these conditions. The gladius wasn't a sword built for wide, sweeping slashes. It worked best in tight spaces, where short thrusts mattered more than brute force. Against enemies already disrupted by falling darts and javelin impacts, those thrusts landed with devastating consistency. And the Romans didn't stop there. Behind the first few ranks stood soldiers ready to replace anyone who got tired or injured. Plumbatae allowed these supporting ranks to contribute to the fight before stepping forward. That meant more combat output with less exposure, conserving Roman energy while exhausting the enemy. Even on rough or muddy terrain, where other missiles became unreliable, the plumbata stayed useful. Its downward arc didn't depend on perfect footing or a long wind-up. Romans could throw it from behind cover, during rain, or while repositioning. The weapon adapted effortlessly to conditions where barbarian tactics struggled. Its cost was low, so legions produced them in bulk. A few lead weights, a wooden shaft, and an iron tip were enough to turn thousands of soldiers into mobile missile platforms. This allowed Rome to enforce its tactical style everywhere, from forests in Germania to open plains in Gaul, from mountain passes to river crossings. The plumbata acted like the first step of a chain reaction. Once it disrupted the enemy, everything else in the Roman arsenal became more dangerous. Cavalry charges hit harder when the opposing infantry lost cohesion. Auxiliaries could flank more easily when the front line panicked. Commanders could execute complex maneuvers knowing the enemy wasn't advancing at full strength. Rome's entire battle rhythm depended on controlling distance, controlling timing, controlling momentum. The plumbata reinforced that control at the earliest and most critical moment, the first contact. Instead of waiting for the clash to happen, the Romans shaped the clash before the enemy even touched their shields. And in warfare, shaping the first seconds of contact often determines the next several hours. It's no surprise that barbarian armies remembered the plumbata long after the battle ended. They faced many Roman weapons, but few disrupted their confidence as efficiently. It wasn't loud, it wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't celebrated in marble statues, but it turned disciplined formations into crushing machines that dismantled entire warbands.